Good afternoon or good evening to some of you. Welcome to this second part of our mini webinar series. My name is Ivo Boom. I manage Servoy Northern America. As in our last webinar series, we are going to keep this short. We're trying to keep it to 25 minutes. We hope that you will ask a lot of questions, which we'll try to answer. We've got some questions in advance, which we'll show in a little bit. Little recap on what Servoy does. We help a lot of ISVs with modernizations of their front ends most of the times. A lot of progress companies, that's why you guys are probably here. In this webinar, we want to share what we've seen that works and what sometimes doesn't work that good. For the guys of you that joined us last week, and by the way, if you didn't or weren't able to be there, this has been recorded. You should be able to find a link in your emails, or otherwise contact us. You'll see our contact details at the last slide. Last week we talked about UI frameworks, how to pick them and when to pick them. A lot of people that we run into, they think that they have to pick their UI frameworks before they start with these kind of projects. We talked about that a little bit. We disagree a little bit about that. In this webinar, maybe we'll have a same kind of discussion on a more technical subject, how to connect to your logic and things like that. I'll go ahead and introduce two of the technical people that will help you guys out and will speak about this subject. First, Jan Eleman, Servoy founder, Servoy evangelist, big 4GL and rapid application development proponent. Jan will kick off in a minute. Then also I've got Sean Devlin on the call. He's one of our senior technical engineers. He's actually on site as we speak, kicking off a Progress modernization project. So we're very glad that he took some time out of his calendar and was able to join us. And again, we'll keep it short. So Jan, if you're there,
yes,
you want to take it away?
Yes. Good evening.
Yeah, hi, Jan.
Good evening for everybody in Europe, and afternoon or morning if you're in the US. Is it still morning in the US, Sean? It's evening, I guess. Afternoon.
Afternoon. Yeah.
Okay. I get confused about all.
Everywhere in the US. Afternoon.
Okay. Excellent.
Maybe Hawaii.
In Hawaii, it's still probably quite early, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, before we kick off, these are the questions that came in so far by email. Obviously, if you have any questions, then you can post them in the questions channel. We will make sure to process them either at the end of this presentation if we have time, and otherwise we'll get back to you by email or if you want to by phone. So some very good questions came in. There's actually one or two that also came up in the previous session about conversion and about the approaches being used that we will briefly discuss. So today we're going to talk about the different ways of connecting to your Progress logic and database, the separation of business logic and design, and some of the steps you can take in this process, and then we'll go into the Q&A. First of all, if you are doing a process like this, and we talked about this briefly in the previous session as well, then have a good look, and we're doing this in 5 or 6 installments. Every time we're zooming into a series of the non-functional requirements that you need to keep in mind as you're doing a modernization like this. And today we'll be looking at 4 of them, and we'll recap them at the end of this session. So let's dive directly into the different ways of connecting to your existing database, your Progress database. And roughly these are the different approaches: connecting through JDBC and ODBC, REST, JSGO, using the ABL connector, a commercial product that is available, the custom way of doing it, and then also a hybrid approach. You'll see this coming back in a couple of slides. Every time you start doing these considerations, make sure that your user experience drives the decision that you take. So don't let this be a pure technical decision. So maybe you could say from a technical or from an architectural point of view, A, B, or C is the best choice. But take a step back, start thinking from the end user. What is your customer expecting in terms of user experience, performance, user interface, all those kind of aspects. So let's dive into the first one. And I think, Sean, you have some experience recently with this first one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. The first choice you could have is to completely roll your own, starting with generating some binding from Java or .NET to your ABL, and then taking that to the web server level and building out your web server and then your front end. And we've seen this with larger Progress ISVs, and the advantages are obviously that you are in total control. Because you're in total control, you have the power to do whatever you want. And some considerations, though, of that approach are the amount of risk involved that you'll get to market in a timely fashion. It also means that you have to have full stack support. You're building all parts of the stack, and you need the qualified people. And the particular organizations we worked with had a really large and deep team that was able to manage this. So yeah, it's not probably for a smaller ISV. And it's reflected in the total cost of ownership then, because anything that you build, you have to maintain. And if you're integrating third-party, libraries into a stack for different pieces, then you have to maintain those as new versions are released. And as anyone knows who's tried to maintain a complete stack, it's a full-time job. So it has the power, but in summary, consider this only if you have the team to support it.
Okay. So the short conclusion is powerful, but very expensive and risky.
Yeah.
All right. Then the second approach is connecting directly to the database using JDBC and ODBC. And Progress has great drivers available. They actually own a company called Data Direct that is specialized in these kind of drivers, and Progress also ships by default with a very good JDBC driver. So there's quite some benefits in doing this. It's very straightforward to configure, very good performance in querying data, in inserting, updating, and deleting data. If you understand your data model, it is a very easy way to go to your database. It integrates with existing object relational mapping tools. There are hundreds of frameworks literally that can do this for you. But there's also some drawbacks of this. I would say the biggest one by far is the fact that you're connecting directly to your tables and to your views. Maybe with some work even to temp tables. However, you're not connecting to your business logic. There's no easy way to connect to ABL. There is no easy way to connect to your pro datasets with this approach. So these are the drawbacks that you have by using this way of connecting. And it still requires a middle tier. So that means that very often you'll have to put an app server in between that can manage the connectivity between the browser and your Progress database to make this all happen. All right, REST, Sean. I think you've done this a couple of times, so why don't you do this one?
Yeah. So another approach is to configure our OpenEdge server to be a producer of a REST web service as a proxy for talking to your database that can go through your APIs. And this is a common approach. It's from my understanding, I'm no Progress expert, but it's fairly simple to set up a server-side producer. And the advantages are, I think, pretty obvious. REST is a universal protocol, HTTP and JSON or XML. So web services are accessible by by most, not just browsers, but also middle tiers. So if you think about the full stack, this makes your business logic callable from different locations, and that can be a great thing. We've seen architectures where REST APIs are used to call Progress business logic directly from the browser, and also where it's called from the middle tier as well. In both cases, it's successful. Some considerations, though, the performance can be variable. It depends a bit on how it was programmed, and also the transactions can be bulkier because you're sort of passing data sets back and forth. It's not always so nuanced, so we see that it's slower than direct database access. And it requires, REST is stateless, so it requires that you make up for that statelessness somewhere else, like in the browser or in the middle tier. So that has complications or considerations. If you make your browser side of your application managing the state, well, then you have to have the resources to develop and maintain web technologies, or the same is true as at the middle tier. Fortunately, the middleware is usually more geared towards session management, so we've seen better UX when the REST web services are consumed at the middle tier on behalf of a browser client rather than directly in the browser, because then you don't have to necessarily map all of the UX directly to the web service call and the data set, but you get to kind of take some nuance into the browser from the middle tier, which is handling that connection. So.
All right, and the next step to that is JSDO. We're not sure if we should put it in this list because it lives more on the front end. So all the other things we've seen so far is typically things that you do on your back end to make the data available, and then on top of that, you can use JSDO, which is a client-side framework. And client-side, it makes it sort of a standard way to connect to your server-side REST services. And it's a free and open source standards-based project that Progress has started, so that they publish for you to use for free. So that's great about it. You have to keep in mind that you will still need, if you want a stateful application, to build that yourself, either inside Progress or in an app server, or use an app server that is stateful. And on the front end, you will still need to do some 3GL type of programming. So that means that either in JavaScript, plain JavaScript, so writing code, you'll have to connect to the services that are provided. It's not as difficult as a plain consumption of a REST service, but you have to keep in mind, if your developers are mainly 4GL type of developers who are used to UI type of development or visual with simple coding, then this can be an extra hurdle to take.
Yeah, so Jan mentioned this ABL connector, a commercial product, in one of the first slides. And this is an interesting tool that allows you to expose some ABL to be connected from Java applications using JDBC, which is typically done to connect directly to a database, for read and writes to a database. But this driver allows you to call logic as a stored procedure, so you can pass in parameters to a store procedure call from the consuming side and get back data sets. So essentially what you would have is that pro data sets can be returned as arrays of JDBC result sets. It may sound complicated, but it's fairly simple to set up. There's some things that can be used, things that need to be done on the Progress end to sort of expose it. So a little bit of Progress code to expose functions to the driver, and then the driver itself is a JDBC driver, so you can install it in a a Java application and start programming against it. And one of the benefits of that is that JDBC is a real standard connector into many different kinds of application platforms, and so it brings the power of your business logic into more industry standard middle tiers. Some considerations. Obviously, it's Java, so you need that environment, some kind of a Java application server, and you need the experience to use it, or some frameworks to make it easier. But there's tons of, as Jan said, tons of tools out there that work with this. And so if you want to call directly from your browser, if you're doing some web application development and you want to call directly from your browser, that wouldn't be possible. It's more for the middle tier.
Yeah, although the same company also provides additional tools for that. Yeah, we've seen quite a few server ISVs use this connector very successfully. So it is if you want to reuse ABL, if you already have separated your business logic, then this is really a very quick way of modernizing your application. Then another approach is a hybrid approach. In this case, you mix and match best of breed. So, for example, what we've seen to be very successful, it was actually one of the questions that was sent in. So what are some of the patterns that you see? And again, as I mentioned in the first slide, your UX should drive this decision on what you're going to choose. But we have seen a lot of success with this particular approach, that you use the ABL connector if you need to connect to business logic that you already have in Progress, and you use JDBC to read data, because very often that doesn't have to be processed by your business logic. Maybe in some specific cases, but very often we see very high performance if you select directly from tables for read operations, and then if you go back to update and insert, you using the ABL connector connect to your business logic without having to rewrite it. And that really gives you a good user experience, because you get better performance, and better performance means that you can deliver a better experience to your end users. So Sean, you have quite some experience in this one about separation. What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, well, I think that it's kind of a truth that can't be avoided in all the ISVs, Progress ISVs that we've worked with that want to modernize. This challenge lays before them, that if they have already or still have business logic that's coupled in the UI, that they're looking at decoupling that to be able to modernize. I guess you could have some telnet-based screen scraper. Technically it's possible to put a front end on your Progress UI logic, but that's not really feasible. So no matter which of these routes that you choose, the separation of business logic and UI is required, and that's not small. Realistically, that's a big challenge. So where we've seen success, though, is where ISVs have made this more manageable by incorporating it into agile development, and still focusing on the user experience and building user-driven software, and then biting off the different pieces of the back end as they develop it. So we've encountered organizations where their initial perception was that, well, first we have to do this entire separation, and not only is that go against agile, which means you don't see the results right away, but the end result could be that after you've done that, then you go to put a front end on it, and either you realize what you've done doesn't entirely bring a great user experience, and you have to maybe map the user experience to the architecture that you've come up with, or you have to go back and modify things and refactor things to get the UX that you want. So not only is it more manageable, but it yields better UX if you can kind of break that up into chunks and deliver full stack solutions in small slices in an agile fashion.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so a couple of where and how to start. Effectively, high level, 3 ways to do it. A Big Bang approach, module, and automatic conversion. If we zoom into those, then let's start with automatic conversion. We've seen from experience that this is extremely difficult, if not impossible. We've seen very little success in automatic conversion. Also because you're taking old code that is not written to today's standards and then try to convert it into something that works. That first part often succeeds, but then making it maintainable is extremely difficult. So we don't see a lot of success with automatic conversion, and it is also very high risk. So our experience is that the first 2 approaches are the way to go. And the first one, Big Bang approach, means that you decide, I'm going to modernize my entire application. Let's pretend you have an ERP. Going to start at the beginning, go on until the end, and then release it. The benefit is obviously that it's one big project. The downside is still risk. You're taking higher risk. If it fails, you spend a lot of time. And that's why most of the times we see a lot of success in doing that module by module. So you decide to begin with the first module that you need to modernize. Let's say part of your ERP is web order entry. Why not start there? And then once you've done that module, release it to your customers. You have something to show. You're building up experience. Your development team is getting used to building web applications. And then module by module start releasing the applications. And this is perfectly manageable as a process if you use an agile approach. And because a lot of modern technology can run very well alongside your existing Progress front ends, you can mix and match the modules that you're using, the different ways even to integrate browser-based applications inside your existing Progress apps if you have users that need to use both your older and your newer modules. So really the key here is to use a very agile approach in doing this. So today we looked at the business logic and building a modern UI in front of it that we discussed in the first session. So again, the focus, if you look at the non-functional requirements, was on development efficiency. How can you use and select the tools and methodologies to do this in an efficient way? Keep in mind to select tools that enable you to scale once you go into the cloud. Think about fast page rendering. We, as Servoy, guarantee sub-second page rendering, but that obviously also means that if you still want your application to be quick, that your backend also needs to be able to deliver data in within that time frame to enable that to your end users. So your backend has to be ready for that as well. Think about security, performance, as you start selecting the tools and the frameworks to modernize your application. And don't forget about session management. A lot of web technologies out there are stateless. And while this is great for smaller applications, building and delivering an ERP without session management is extremely difficult. There are very few companies that have been able to do this. So then selecting a platform as you start to modernize that allows you to seamlessly do session management in the same way as you're used to in a Progress Windows world is a very important thing to take into consideration. All right, back to our moderator. Ivo, are you seeing any additional questions come in?
Yeah, I actually got 2. By the way, we hit the 25-minute mark, so let's try to do this as quickly as possible. So one that came in is, you mentioned module by module. Is that the same as Agile? And I don't know the answer to it, Jan, or Sean.
The short answer is yes. If you use an agile approach, then looking high level at agile, then you don't try to eat an elephant in one setting. You try to do very short sprints, typically 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks you try to deliver something that works. That could be a module, that could be part of a module. So even in most cases, if you're using an agile approach, you will even split up a module into small sub-segments and start with what most matters. And that is very often the user experience. So start with the user experience and everything else should follow that.
Okay. Then another one I got in here, and that's somebody that paid attention. He said a couple slides back, you mentioned sub-second performance in the previous webinar. How does that impact this current subject?
So it's equally important on both the previous sessions. On the previous session, you need to select UI frameworks that can render quickly, that can communicate efficiently with your server. At the same time, if you're taking existing ABL and Progress databases to your internet-based customers, you need to make sure that all of that performs very well as well. And where necessary, you need to tune it or find the tools to find where the problematic areas are. And Progress has some great profiling tools to find out, is my data set returned in less than? You should typically look at splitting half the time between your backend and half the time between your front end. So if you want to guarantee to your end user that page can be rendered in a second, then your backend should return even complex data types in less than half a second. So that could mean that you need to change it or refactor it to get the best user experience. And sometimes that can be hard, but it can absolutely be done.
All right. Then if I look at these 4 questions that came in, you skipped to the next slide, Jan. I wanted to.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. So question number 4, automatic conversion. I heard that you said something about that. Question number 3, separation of UI and logic. You talked quite a bit about that. Question number 1, which approach is most used? You guys talked about the benefits and the disadvantages.
Yeah,
do you have an opinion about that? Or?
Yeah, the short answer to that is your user experience should drive this question. So don't let this be a separate decision that you take upfront before you start this project, but it should be part of the whole decision in doing this, and it should really be driven by the user experience you want to deliver. Now, if you look at all the projects that we have done within Servoice, and now we're talking about the projects we've done, not about all the entire Progress world, then we see that the hybrid approach is used very often. But it may not be the right solution for you. But if you look at statistics, then that is used a lot. So hybrid means selecting directly to the database and doing updates and inserts through your business logic. But again, it is very application specific. If you have a very specific app with a use case, you need to analyze this well before you do that.
All right. Then that leaves question 2. I've said something about that in the last webinar as well. I personally think we should skip this one because we're going to do a lot with the risk of doing self-promotion. I assume we're going to talk about that a little bit in part 6, which will be June 28th.